Good evening, viewers. Thanks for watching. What I'm going to do today is a very simple instruction tutorial. Honestly, something that you can probably figure out by yourself, or you can find 1,000 other videos about on YouTube. But just me adding my little 2 cents to this corner of the universe. This is going to be, let's call it an introduction to airbrushing for a model. In this case, it's a tank I've been working on. It really is literally the basics of what you need to how you get paint on the model. And I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert. There are many people on here far better at this than me. I'm still a learner myself, but just a little bit of what you need. If it helps somebody who's less experienced than myself, then all the better. I'm happy for it. So the tools of what you need: first of all, a compressor. My compressor is down on the floor. I'm not going to get that up and show you because it's really dirty and dusty, and I'm quite embarrassed by it. It's a cheap old thing, but it does the job. You need an airbrush. This is a new one I bought recently. This is a Infinity by Harder and Steenbeck. It's quite a fine nozzle brush. It's a 0.15mm brush, so it doesn't give a very wide spray pattern. So it's good for detail work, but it's also good for demonstration purposes because you can see a lot clearer what it's actually doing, rather than just a couple of squirts and it's painting the entire model. It's a very nice airbrush though. There are lots of cheaper variants on the market than this. They all do a very good job. You've got your airbrush, then you need basics. I use these plastic shot glasses because they're okay. I understand they're no friend of the environment, but they're disposable. They're very cheap. I mean, from the supermarket you can get 20 or 30 for like £1. They don't cost much at all. Pipettes, again, not a friend of the environment, so I'm really not doing the best as far as keeping the environment green, but they are easily obtained off the internet. I mean, if you go to somewhere like Hobbycraft, you'll pay £2 or £3 for 10. Off Amazon or eBay, I've gotten these in, well, as you can see, got lots of them. I think I got a pack of about 500. I think it was for must have been £7 or £8. It was very little. They don't cost much at all. So there really is no. I mean, unless you're extremely environmentally conscious, there really is no cause for taking any time in trying to clean these or reuse them, just because they're so cheap and easy to come across. And let's be honest, if you were massively environmentally conscious, you probably wouldn't be building plastic models and using the paints that we use and the solvents that we use for cleaning things. But it's not for me to judge anybody else. If you want to reuse them, go ahead. You can do, but you probably spend more time trying to clean these out and to reuse than you would for just buying a new one. So, but they're very handy. Obviously, you need something to paint. So this is my top section of my Walker M41 Bulldog, American tank from the post-war period. And the important part, IPA. Some people will use this for thinning and things, and you can use it for various types of paint. I really just use it as a cleaning product. So once I'm done, one of the most important things about airbrushing is the maintenance of the airbrush itself. When you take it out of the box, it'll work like a dream, but if you don't clean it after you use it, it's not going to last you very long. So once you're done with the use, a quick spray of IPA through the brush, depending on what kind of paint you've been using, of course, but for what I use, IPA will clean it nice and good. And we want paint, obviously. Can't paint a model without paint. So this is a Tamiya acrylic. Excellent paints is what I use for the most part. I've tried other brands. I'm a big fan of the Guns Mr. Colour range as well. They tend to be very similar to the Tamiya paint. I've tried Vallejo. I'm not a fan of the Vallejo paints at all. I really have problems with those. It's probably just me, because there's a lot of people that rate them highly, but I'm not a fan of the Vallejo ones. Tamiya, I think, particularly if you're a beginner anyway, if you're looking to get decent results without too many disasters, Tamiya is where you need to look. And also they're easily accessible. They're very easy to get hold of. That some paint brands are a lot more difficult to source. And then the next one that you want is a thinner. Now, you quite excuse me. You are quite okay to go for Tamiya's own thinner, X20A. It has been quite difficult to get hold of recently. I don't know what the reason for that is. I think there's been production shortages of it. Something be going on in Japan. But I think it is becoming available again, but it has been in short supply. But I've always been a bigger fan of this one here. Is my favourite for a long time now. This is Mr. Hobby Mr. Colour Leveling Thinner. It's not cheap. I think this is about between 10 and 12 pounds a bottle for this size, but it does last a very long time. It has a self-leveling element to it, so it just helps the paint settle nicely when you use it to thin the paint. It's also good for when you're doing a clear coat. If you finish your clear coat off with a very fine mist of just thinner over the top of it, really helps to level it out and give you a nice finish. So okay, on to the details of what we're going to do. So for now, we're going to mix the paint. So make sure you're giving your paint a good shake. I've been shaking this up before I started making the video, so it's all good. Let's get the lid off that one. The paint. And then we also want some thinner as well. You will see varying opinions on the ratio for paint to thinner, and again that will depend on the paint, but it also depends on the sort of the thickness of the paint that you want to go on the model. I tend to go for sort of 50-50, so 50% thinner, 50% paint, but I'm not going to pretend there's a scientific process behind the measuring. I do it visually. The Tamiya paint itself is actually quite a nice consistency as it is, so you never any real risk of massively clogging up your airbrush. Probably a little bit heavier on the paint, maybe 60-40, I'm not sure, but I'm not going to lie, it could be a little different every time I do this, so I'm just going to give it a little bit of a mix up in the pot. Okay, so that looks to me like that is ready to go in the airbrush. What I'm just going to do first is pour some IPA into another little pot, and I always like to, just before I start brushing, I'm going to put a little bit of a quick spray through the airbrush to make sure it's clean before I put some paint in it. Best thing you can ever invest in if you've got an airbrush is one of these items. So just for spraying into, so you haven't got to get paper everywhere to spray onto. So let's turn the airbrush on with the compressor. So apologies for the noise that makes. Like I said, it's not a very quiet compressor. You can hear the mechanism is all working fine. A little bit of thinner in there. Sorry, a little bit of IPA, I apologise, not thinner. You can use thinner for that actually as well if you wanted to, but the thinner is more expensive than the IPA, so I'll be using the IPA for this. So just so you can see, I can see it hitting my hand. Right, so that is coming out. So if I move this to one side a little bit, just so you can see. You can see this on the video, but it's wetting the paper. Look, you can see there's no colour coming out of it. It's perfectly clean. So I'm just going to spray the rest. I'm going to pour the rest out for purposes of time. But just going to spray it till it gets dry. So there's no IPA left in there. And then what we'll do is put some paint in the brush. Do another little quick mix. Okay, and then just drop the paint in the cup. The excess back in the brush. So I'm just going to try it on the paper first to make sure it's working. And you can see straight away we're getting paint. I'm also getting a little bit of splatter, so I think I might have the pressure a bit too high there. So let's turn the pressure down a bit. That's actually dribbling over the top of the colour cup, so I'm just a little bit more careful. So, as a general rule with an airbrush, the further away you are, the wider the field of the colour that you get. So if you're from a distance, it's a very wide spread. If you go in closer, you get a much finer line. To regulate the airflow a little bit, you can get a nice fine line if you need to. So then, moving on to putting it onto the actual model. Depends on what you're working on. Something like this, where we're looking to paint the whole piece the same colour, there really isn't too much finesse involved. It's just a case of let's get the paint onto the model. But if you're looking to do more detailed items, obviously you want to be a bit more careful with it. But for this example, we're just going to try and be even. Let's just try and keep the paint on in an even manner. You can see it goes on nice and easily. This is a two-stage airbrush. This is a two-stage airbrush mechanism. So when you press the button down, it allows the airflow to start, and then when you pull the trigger back, it releases the paint, which means you can regulate the amount of paint that goes on. I think I've actually got this thinned a little bit thinner than I would like because it is splattering a little bit. But I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'll generally go for a second coat anyway to cover up any patches that I've missed. And then you just want to approach it from both sides so that I can get all angles, make sure I'm not missing anything. There we are, so that's starting to look good. So I will let that dry and then I'll give that a second coat. I still need to prime the barrel and I'll paint the barrel separately. But there we go, airbrushing made easy. A little bit extra. I've only got a tiny little bit of paint left in the cup, so I'm not going to bother trying to get that back out of there. So if I move that back to the other side for now, just going to show you it's still painting. I'm just going to blow all the paint straight out of it until it runs out. Shouldn't take too long. But normally I'd be putting this in the spray bottle, but I'm just doing it on the paper to make it more visual. Okay, so there we go. So you can hear it's run out of paint now. So while the paint inside is still wet, I'm going to put some IPA in. I normally at this point just give it a little bit of a clean around on the inside as well with a Q-tip or cotton bud, or however you choose to call this. Make sure none of the paint is stuck to the interior mechanism of the cup, and then just keep spraying with that. You'll see that will come out looking right. So already you can see that there's no paint coming out of that anymore. I'm happy that that is clean. I'm just going to tip that out just to make sure it's clean, and there's nothing left. I'm going to turn the air pressure right up. Yeah, clean. I've just got paint on that, so just a little bit more with the high pressure. Make sure it's clean. Find a little swab around with the brush to make sure, and there we go. I'm happy that I can put that away and it'll be okay until I want to use it again. Obviously periodically, maybe once a week, I do strip it down and give it a proper good clean, but that's a different process entirely, and it's only really going to be helpful if you've got the exact same airbrush, because the interior guts of the machines are different from brush to brush. So but that as a general rule is something that you can do for all airbrushes, and you should keep it in reasonable condition. So yeah, thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Hopefully it's helped. I'd love to hear any comments or any feedback you might have, or any questions or any suggestions. I'm always open to. Thanks for watching.